Eric Mason stood at attention as the alien spacecraft settled onto the landing pad. Mist swirled around its sleek blue hull as pressure equalized. This was a historic moment, the first time humans would board a Zolaxian vessel. "At ease, Staff Sergeant," said Captain Rogers. "Remember, you're representing all of humanity today." Eric nodded, his mouth dry. 6 weeks ago, no one on Earth knew aliens existed. Now he was about to step onto their ship. The Joint Military Scientific Team had chosen him after reviewing his record, multiple combat tours, advanced first aid training, and a surprisingly calm reaction when the Zolaxians first appeared on their view screens. A seam appeared in the spacecraft's side, widening into a doorway. 2 figures emerged, tall, slender beings with pale blue skin that glistened with moisture. Their large, dark eyes blinked slowly as they surveyed the humans waiting on the tarmac. "Welcome to Earth," said Dr. Lily Turner, stepping forward with her hands open in the greeting gesture the diplomatic team had established. The taller Zolaxian mimicked the gesture. "We thank you for your hospitality." Its voice came through a translator device, slightly mechanical but understandable. "I am Vexlar, Chief Medical Officer of the Healing Tide *. We are honored by your trust in allowing us to bring our vessel to your planet." After introductions, Vexlar turned to Eric. "Staff Sergeant Mason, we understand you have volunteered to visit our ship. Is this correct?" "Yes, sir," or, yes, Medical Officer Vexlar," Eric said. "Excellent. We are most interested in learning about human physiology. Our species has had limited contact with beings as—" Vexlar paused, searching for the right word. "Solid as humans." Dr. Turner smiled. "The Zolaxians evolved from sea-dwelling creatures. Their bodies contain significantly more fluid than ours." Eric hadn't known that. He looked more closely at the aliens and noticed a slight rippling beneath their skin. Captain Rogers stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Mason will accompany Dr. Turner aboard your vessel for the agreed 24-hour observation period. They carry emergency beacons and will maintain hourly radio contact." Vexlar's wide mouth formed what Eric hoped was a smile. "We assure you they will be treated with utmost care." The walk up the ramp into the alien ship made Eric's heart pound. The interior was bathed in soft, bluish light. The air felt thick and humid. Comfortable for the amphibious Zolaxians, slightly uncomfortable for humans. "Our medical bay is this way," said the second Zolaxian, who had introduced herself as Nala, a senior physician. As they walked, Eric noticed the corridors curved gently, with no sharp angles. Everything had a smooth, almost liquid quality. Other Zolaxians they passed stared openly at the humans, their gill-like structures on their necks fluttering in what Eric guessed was excitement. "Your ship is beautiful," Dr. Turner said, her scientist's eyes taking in everything. "Thank you," Vexlar replied. "The Healing Tide * is primarily a research vessel. We study biology across the stars. Your species is particularly fascinating to us." "Why is that?" Eric asked. Nayla answered, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. "You evolved on land, under greater gravity than our homeworld, with higher oxygen levels and more intense solar radiation. Your bodies develop remarkable protection systems we lack." They entered a large chamber filled with equipment Eric couldn't identify. Tanks of various colored liquids lined the walls. Several Zolaxians in darker blue coverings, perhaps uniforms, looked up from workstations. "This is our main research laboratory," Vexlar announced. "And now, if you permit, we would like to begin with some basic scans of your physiology." Eric exchanged glances with Dr. Turner, who nodded encouragingly. "Sure," he said, stepping forward. "What do you need me to do?" He had no idea that within hours, these alien medics would witness firsthand just how different human bodies truly were, or that his ordinary human resilience would soon seem like a superpower to their eyes. Eric followed Vexlar through the curved corridors of the Healing Tide *. Dr. Turner walked beside him, her face bright with excitement as she asked the aliens about their medical technologies. The tour had lasted 3 hours, and Eric was amazed by what he had seen. The Zolaxians had machines that could scan every cell in a body and tanks where injured aliens floated in healing liquid. "This next laboratory is where we study tissue regeneration," Vexler said, placing his webbed hand on a panel beside a doorway. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, several Zolaxian scientists looked up from their work. The room was filled with containers holding what looked like pieces of tissue suspended in clear gel. Along one wall stood a row of tall machines with glowing energy fields between metal poles. "These containment fields let us study dangerous materials safely," Nayla explained. She guided them toward one of the fields where a pulsing purple mass floated in midair. "This organism is from the fourth moon of Frixel. It produces an enzyme that speeds healing." Dr. Turner leaned in close to examine it. "Fascinating. Does it work on Zolaxian physiology?" "Yes, though the process is still experimental," Vexler said. "We hope to." A loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship. One of the machines near them began to flash red. "Containment failure," a Zolaxian scientist shouted, backing away from the machine. "Field collapse imminent." Vexler's eyes widened. "Everyone out. Now." The Zolaxians rushed toward the exit. Eric grabbed Dr. Turner's arm to pull her along, but she had frozen in place, staring at the failing containment field. "Turner, move," Eric shouted. The machine sparked, and then, with a deafening crack, it exploded. Metal shards and components flew in all directions. Eric saw several pieces heading straight for Dr. Turner. Without thinking, he shoved her down and covered her body with his own. Pain tore across Eric's back and shoulders as metal fragments sliced through his uniform and into his flesh. He grunted but maintained his protective position until the rain of debris stopped. "Eric." Dr. Turner's voice was muffled against his chest. "Are you hurt?" He rolled off her, feeling warm wetness spreading across his back. "I'll live," he managed to say. The room was filled with a thin mist and the smell of burning electronics. Zolaxian voices called out in panic. Eric helped Dr. Turner to her feet. She gasped when she saw his back. "Oh my God, you're bleeding badly." Several Zolaxians rushed back into the room. When they saw Eric, they made high-pitched sounds of distress. "The human is critically wounded," Nella cried out. "Prepare emergency life support. We must move quickly or we will lose him." 2 Zolaxian medical staff hurried forward with what looked like a floating stretcher. They seemed afraid to touch Eric, their webbed hands trembling. "Careful," one said. "Their bodies are so fragile when punctured." Eric wanted to tell them he was okay, but the pain was making it hard to speak. He allowed them to help him onto the stretcher, lying on his stomach to keep pressure off his wounded back. "Don't worry, buddy," Dr. Turner said, walking beside him as they rushed through the corridors. "They have amazing medical technology. You'll be fixed up in no time." The Zolaxians exchanged what Eric thought were doubtful looks. "I regret this tragedy," Vexler said, his voice shaking. "We have never had a containment field fail before. Please know we will do everything possible to save your comrade." "Save me," Eric mumbled, confused. "It's just some cuts." The aliens moved faster, speaking rapidly in their own language. Eric caught words like massive trauma and critical condition from their translators. As they entered the medical bay, Eric saw a team of Zolaxian doctors preparing equipment with frantic energy. They looked at him with what he now recognized as fear and pity in their large eyes. Eric realized the aliens thought he was dying. The Zolaxian medical bay buzzed with frantic activity. 6 alien doctors surrounded Eric as he lay face down on a treatment bed. Their movements were quick and nervous, their gill flaps fluttering rapidly. Blood pressure falling. One called out, watching a screen with strange symbols. "Prepare fluid replacement," Nayla ordered. "We must compensate for the massive blood loss." Eric tried to lift his head. "Hey, I think you guys are overreacting a bit." Please remain still, a doctor said, gently pushing his head back down. Conservation of energy is essential for survival at this stage. Dr. Turner stood nearby, watching with growing concern, not for Eric's wounds, but for the alien's reaction to them. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice to be heard above the commotion. "I believe there's a misunderstanding. Staff Sergeant Mason is injured, yes, but he's not in critical condition." Vexlar turned to her, his large eyes blinking rapidly. "Dr. Turner, I understand you wish to remain hopeful, but our scans show extensive tissue damage and significant blood loss. For our species, such injuries would mean certain death within minutes." "That's just it," Turner explained. "Humans are different. Our blood clots quickly to stop bleeding, and our skin and muscles are much thicker than yours." As if to prove her point, Eric sat up on the bed, wincing but moving under his own power. "Really, I've had worse from falling off my bike as a kid." The medical team froze, staring at him in disbelief. "Impossible," whispered one doctor. "The blood loss alone should have rendered him unconscious." Nella approached cautiously, holding a scanner. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward Eric's back. "Go ahead," Eric said, trying not to grimace as the movement pulled at his wounds. The alien physician ran her scanner over his back, studying the readings with growing amazement. "The bleeding, it's already slowing. How can this be?" Dr. Turner stepped forward. "Human blood contains platelets that form clots to seal wounds. Our bodies have evolved strong defenses against injury and blood loss." "Fascinating," Vexler said, joining Nella to examine the scanner. "And this is normal for your species." "Pretty much," Eric said, "though I could use some bandages and maybe stitches for the deeper cuts." The aliens exchanged glances of astonishment. One doctor hurried to a cabinet and returned with supplies that looked somewhat familiar to Eric. "We should document this," another doctor said, already recording with a small device. "The resilience is remarkable." As they began to clean and dress his wounds, Eric noticed their touch was feather-light, as if they feared hurting him further. "You can press a bit harder," he told them. "I won't break." Nella made a sound that might have been a nervous laugh. "For us, such pressure on open wounds would be extremely painful." "It hurts," Eric admitted, "but it's manageable." While they worked, Dr. Turner explained more about human physiology. "Our skin is much thicker than yours, and beneath it, we have layers of fat and muscle that provide additional protection. Our blood vessels constrict when damaged to reduce bleeding." "Such adaptations," Vexler said, his voice filled with wonder. "Your species must have evolved in harsh conditions indeed." "Earth has its challenges," Turner said. "Predators, extreme weather, varied terrain. Humans had to be tough to survive." After 30 minutes, Eric's back was cleaned and bandaged. The Zalaxian medical team still hovered nearby, seemingly expecting him to collapse at any moment. "So," Eric said, carefully pulling a clean shirt over his head that one of the aliens had provided, "what's for dinner? Nearly dying makes a guy hungry." The medical team stared at him in shock. Then, one by one, they began making a bubbling sound that Eric realized was laughter. "Incredible," Vexler said, "not only surviving but making jokes. Your species continues to surprise us, Staff Sergeant Mason." Eric grinned. "Call me Eric. And trust me, Doc, you haven't seen anything yet." 3 days had passed since the accident. Eric sat on the edge of his bed in the Zalaxian medical bay, carefully stretching his arms to test the healing wounds on his back. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Vexlar and 2 younger Zalaxians. "Good morning, Eric," Vexlar said. "These are junior medical officers Keel and Mira. They have requested permission to observe your recovery process, if you are willing." Eric smiled. "Sure, the more the merrier. I'm getting used to being the zoo exhibit." The junior officers looked confused until Dr. Turner, who had just entered behind them, explained. It's a joke. Eric means he doesn't mind being observed. Since the accident, Eric had become something of a celebrity aboard the Asterisk Healing Tide Asterisk. Zalaxian medical staff took turns visiting him, asking questions and scanning his wounds as they healed. "How do you feel today?" Vexlar asked, approaching with a scanner. "Better," Eric said. "Still sore, but I could probably start light exercise tomorrow." The junior officers made clicking sounds of surprise. "Exercise? With open wounds?" Mira asked, her translator making her sound both concerned and fascinated. "They're not really open anymore," Eric explained. "See." He turned slightly to show where the smaller cuts had already formed scabs. "Remarkable," Heel said, leaning closer. "Our species would still be in critical care with such injuries." Dr. Turner sat down beside Eric. "I've been learning about Zalaxian physiology," she said. "Your people evolved in a very different environment than humans." Vexler nodded. "Our homeworld, Zolax, is largely covered by shallow seas. Life began there as simple floating organisms. Even as we evolved intelligence, we never faced many physical threats." "No predators?" Eric asked. "Few," Vexler said. "Our ancestors lived in large colonies, floating on the surface of the seas. We developed technology before we needed to develop physical defenses." Eric thought about Earth's violent history, filled with predators, wars, and harsh environments that had shaped human evolution. "That explains a lot," he said. "Humans had to be tough just to survive. Your resilience is more than physical," Mira observed. "You maintain positive spirits despite injury. Our people often experience psychological distress following even minor wounds." Eric shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his bandages. No point worrying about what's already happened. Best to focus on getting better. Later that day, Eric joined Dr. Turner in the ship's common area. Several Zalaxians were eating their meals, strange, glowing gel-like substances in shallow bowls. They had provided human-compatible food for their guests. "They're amazed by you," Turner said quietly. "Not just your physical healing, but your attitude too." Eric took a bite of the surprisingly tasty food. "I'm learning a lot about them as well." "Did you know they can regrow limbs?" Turner nodded. "But it takes them nearly a year and requires special medical assistance. Their natural healing is actually quite poor." "Seems we each evolved different solutions," Eric said. "They developed advanced medicine to compensate for their fragile bodies." A young Zalaxian approached their table hesitantly. Eric recognized her as Eula, a research assistant he had met the previous day. "May I join you?" she asked. "Please do," Turner said, gesturing to an empty seat. Eula sat down carefully. "I have a question, if you don't mind. Do all humans recover from injuries as quickly as Eric?" "More or less," Turner said. "Some faster, some slower, depending on age, health, and the specific injury. But we're generally resilient." "And pain?" Eula asked, looking at Eric. "How do you manage it?" Eric considered the question. "We feel it, but we can push through when necessary. Pain is just the body's warning system." Eula's gill flaps fluttered in what Eric now recognized as amazement. "For us, pain is overwhelming. It consumes our thoughts." Eric nodded with new understanding. The Zalaxians weren't just physically different. Their entire relationship with their bodies was alien to human experience. "I think," he said slowly, "we have a lot to learn from each other." 1 week after Eric's injury, he sat with Dr. Turner in the ship's observation deck. His back was healing well, with most of the smaller cuts already closed. Through the large viewing window, they watched Earth shining like a blue jewel against the blackness of space. "Captain Rogers says we should head home tomorrow," Turner said. "Our observation period has been extended long enough." Eric nodded, feeling oddly reluctant to leave. "I've gotten used to this place. The Zalaxians are good people." Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the ship. Lights flickered, and a piercing alarm began to sound. "What's happening?" Eric asked, standing quickly. The ship's communication system activated. Emergency in propulsion sector. All medical personnel report to emergency stations. Damage control teams to Deck 4 immediately. Eric and Turner exchanged worried glances. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. "We should find Vexlar," Turner said. They hurried through the corridors, which were now filled with Zolaxians moving quickly but orderly toward their stations. The air smelled strange, burnt and chemical. They found Vexlar in the main medical bay, directing his staff as they prepared emergency supplies. "What happened?" Eric asked. Vexlar looked up, his normally blue skin pale with stress. "Propulsion system malfunction. There was an explosion in the engine room. We have multiple casualties and fires on decks 4 and 5. Another Zolaxian rushed in. Senior physician Nilla is trapped in Research Lab 3. The corridor is filled with smoke, and the temperature is rising. Vexlar's gill flaps fluttered in distress. We cannot reach her without environment suits, and all available suits are with the damage control teams." Eric stepped forward. "I can go." "Impossible," Vexlar said. "The conditions would kill you." "I can handle smoke and heat better than your people," Eric insisted. "Human lungs are designed to filter toxins, and our skin can withstand higher temperatures." Vexlar hesitated, then nodded. "It may be Nella's only chance, but you are still injured." "I'm healed enough for this," Eric said firmly. A Zolaxian technician quickly showed Eric a map of the affected area and gave him a small communication device. Dr. Turner looked worried, but did not try to stop him. "Be careful," she said simply. Eric made his way down to Deck 4. As soon as the lift doors opened, he was hit by a wall of hot, acrid smoke. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth and moved forward. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lights and the occasional spark from damaged equipment. The heat increased as he approached the research lab. "Nala," he called out. "Can you hear me?" A faint voice responded from behind a partially blocked door. "Help. I cannot breathe." Eric pushed against the door, forcing it open enough to squeeze through. Inside, flames licked at several workstations. Nala lay on the floor, her gill flaps moving weakly as she struggled to breathe in the smoke-filled air. Without hesitation, Eric lifted the alien physician into his arms. She was surprisingly light, her body mostly fluid-filled chambers under her delicate skin. "Hold on," he told her. "I'm getting you out of here." The return journey was harder. Eric's lungs burned with each breath, and sweat poured down his face from the intense heat. His back wounds throbbed painfully under the strain of carrying Nulla. 2 Zolaxian crew members waited at the lift, wearing environmental suits. They stared in shock as Eric emerged from the smoke, carrying Nulla. "She needs oxygen," Eric gasped, handing her over. As they rushed Nulla to the medical bay, one of the crew members stayed with Eric, who was now coughing violently. "How did you survive in there?" the Zolaxian asked in awe. The atmosphere was toxic. Eric managed a weak smile between coughs. "Just another day at the office." In the medical bay, Dr. Turner helped Eric to a bed while the Zolaxian medical team worked on Nulla and other injured crew members. "You crazy fool," Turner said, but her voice was filled with pride. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," Eric replied hoarsely. And neither was Nulla. Across the room, Vexlar watched the human with new respect in his large eyes. 2 days after the explosion, the Asterisk Healing Tide Asterisk had been repaired enough to function safely. The injured crew members were recovering, including Nala, who had suffered smoke damage to her sensitive respiratory system, but was now stable. Eric sat in the ship's conference room with Dr. Turner, Captain Rogers, who had come aboard after the emergency, and several high-ranking Zolaxians, including Vexlar. "Staff Sergeant Mason," Vexlar began, his voice solemn, "we owe you a great debt. Your actions saved Nela's life." Eric shifted uncomfortably under the attention. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Vexlar said firmly. "No Zolaxian could have entered that environment without protective gear." The smoke alone would have killed us in minutes. Captain Rogers looked at Eric with pride. Earth Command has been fully briefed on your actions, Mason. They're quite impressed. Vexler leaned forward, his large eyes intense. This incident, combined with your remarkable recovery from injuries, has led us to a scientific proposal. He glanced at Dr. Turner. With your planet's permission, we would like to study human biology more closely. Study? Eric asked cautiously. Dr. Turner smiled reassuringly. They want to understand how our bodies handle trauma and toxic environments. It could help them develop new medical treatments for their own people. Nothing invasive, Vexlar added quickly. Tissue samples, detailed scans, and perhaps some controlled tests of your physical capabilities. Eric thought about it. If it would help your people, I'm willing. Captain Rogers nodded. Earth Command agrees. They're sending a full medical research team to work with the Zelaxians. This could be the beginning of a valuable exchange of knowledge. Later that day, Eric found himself back in the medical bay. This time, instead of being a patient, he was helping set up equipment for the new research project. Nella, still recovering in a nearby bed, watched him with interest. Eric, she called softly. May I speak with you? He walked over to her bed. Her blue skin was paler than usual, but her eyes were alert. How are you feeling? He asked. Better, thanks to you. She gestured for him to sit beside her bed. I have been thinking about what happened. You risked your life to save mine. Eric shrugged. It's what we do. That is what fascinates me, Nella said. Your willingness to endure pain and danger for others. Is this also common among humans? Pretty common, yeah. We're taught from childhood to help others in need. Nella's gill flaps fluttered thoughtfully. Combined with your physical resilience, it makes your species quite remarkable. Eric smiled. We're not so special. You Zelaxians developed amazing technology to overcome your physical limitations. That's impressive too. Perhaps, Nella said, that is why our species should work together. We each have different strengths. Dr. Turner entered with Vexler and several Earth scientists who had just arrived on a shuttle. The humans carried equipment and sample kits. Eric, Turner called, come meet the research team. They're eager to get started. For the next several hours, Eric answered questions and submitted to various tests. The Earth scientists examined his healing wounds, while the Zelaxians recorded everything with their advanced equipment. It's incredible, said Dr. Pat Allen, the lead Earth scientist. The Zelaxian scanning technology shows cellular activity we've never been able to observe before. We're seeing exactly how your body repairs damaged tissue. Vexler nodded excitedly. And we are learning how human cells can withstand conditions that would destroy ours. By evening, both human and Zelaxian scientists were talking animatedly, sharing ideas, and planning new experiments. I think we've started something important here, Dr. Turner said to Eric as they watched the two species working together. Eric nodded, touching the nearly healed wounds on his back, all because of a few cuts that weren't even that serious. To them, they were life-threatening, Turner reminded him. Your minor injuries opened the door to what might become the most important medical collaboration in human history. Eric smiled. Not bad for a day's work, then. 3 months had passed since the accident on the Asterisk Healing Tide Asterisk. Eric stood in his dress uniform before a large window on the newly built space station Asterisk Unity Asterisk. The station hung in orbit between Earth and the Moon, its curved arms stretching out like welcoming hands. Nervous? Dr. Turner asked, joining him at the window. Eric smiled. A little. It's not every day you become the official link between two species. Today was the formal ceremony establishing the Human Zelaxian Medical Research Initiative. Leaders from Earth and a delegation of high-ranking Zelaxians would sign the agreement, with Eric serving as the military liaison for the project. You deserve this position, Turner said. None of this would have happened without you. Eric touched his back where the scars from his injuries were now just faint lines. All I did was get hurt and heal. Humans have been doing that for thousands of years, but never in front of aliens who thought those injuries should have killed you, Turner reminded him. The station's announcement system chimed softly. All personnel please report to the main hall for the Alliance ceremony. The main hall was filled with humans and Zolaxians. Eric took his place on the stage alongside Captain Kate Bell, his new commanding officer. The Earth delegation sat on one side, the Zolaxians on the other. Vexler was there, now serving as Chief Science Officer for the Zolaxian side of the initiative. Nella had become the lead medical researcher, fully recovered from her injuries during the ship emergency. The human representative, Admiral Harris, stepped to the center of the stage. Today marks a historic moment for both our peoples. The Human Zolaxian Medical Research Initiative represents the first formal scientific alliance between our species. The Zolaxian High Minister joined the Admiral. Through cooperation, we will achieve medical advances that neither species could accomplish alone. Our different evolutionary paths have given us different strengths. Together, we are stronger than apart. Eric watched as they signed the official documents. He thought about how a simple accident had led to this moment. His ordinary human ability to recover from injuries, something he had always taken for granted, had amazed the Zolaxians and opened the door to cooperation. After the ceremony, Yila approached Eric. She now worked as a junior researcher in the initiative. Staff Sergeant Mason, she said, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. The first research vessel is ready for inspection. Would you like to see it? Eric nodded and followed her to a viewing port overlooking the docking bay. Below them floated a sleek ship, larger than the Asterisk Healing Tide Asterisk, but with the same graceful curves. The Asterisk Endurance Asterisk, Yila said proudly, named to honor human resilience. It combines our medical technology with your environmental adaptations. Captain Bell joined them at the port. She's a beauty, isn't she? We launch next week to explore the Ta City system. The ship is designed so both species can work comfortably side by side. Later that evening, Eric attended the celebration dinner. Humans and Zolaxians mingled, sharing specially prepared foods that both species could enjoy. Vexler raised a glass in a toast. To unexpected beginnings. Who would have thought that what we saw as terrible wounds would lead to such a wonderful partnership? Everyone raised their glasses. Eric caught Nayla's eye across the room, and she gave him the gesture that Zolaxians use to show deep respect. As Eric looked around at the mixed group of humans and aliens working together, he felt a sense of pride. His injuries, which the Zolaxians had once thought would kill them, had instead built a bridge between worlds. To the future, Eric said, raising his glass higher. And to finding strength in our differences. Human and alien voices joined together in agreement. Outside the windows of the space station, Earth turned slowly below them, a blue jewel in the darkness. Above, the stars beckoned, waiting for the Asterisk Endurance Asterisk and her mixed crew to begin their journey of discovery together.